I've known since I was 14 that there were things that I thought were normal and that were okay that nobody else seems to think are normal and okay.
The significance of 11 skulls.
We believe that 11 is the total number of victims.
This is the most important thing you will hear in the case of Israel Keyes, whose capture has made the whole of the USA moan in joy. How did Keyes get caught, and what was his motivation? Join us as we uncover the shocking findings. Being the second of 10 children, Israel Keyes was born on January 7, 1978, to Heidi Keyes Hawkinson and John Jeffrey "Jeff" Keyes in Richmond, Utah. His parents were from Torrance, California, and belonged to the Fundamentalist Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. However, Keyes and his brothers were homeschooled until 1983. When Israel was 5 years old, Keyes' father relocated the family to a secluded area of land in Stevens County, just north of Colville, Washington, after abandoning the Fundamentalist Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. The Keyes family was cut off from society and resided in a one-room cabin on Rocky Creek Road without running water or electricity. The family lived in Colville and regularly attended services at the Ark, a Christian identity-affiliated church that promoted white nationalist doctrine. Israel later compared the Ark's surroundings to that of the Amish. The Keyes family made friends with the nearby family of Chevy Kehoe, who was subsequently found guilty of a triple murder in 1996, during this time that they were attending the Ark. Israel, as a child, enjoyed setting fires in the woods, breaking into houses, and shooting at neighbors' homes with his BB pistol. Occasionally, he and another young person would break into residences. However, the other young person avoided him after seeing Israel shoot an animal. Israel once stole multiple firearms from his neighbor's house, and when his parents found out about the stash, they had him apologize. Israel, who at 14 years old was 6 feet 2 inches, 1.88 meters tall, occasionally sold stolen firearms to adults in the neighborhood. Later on, when he was just 18 or 20 years old, he confessed to sexually abusing a young girl in Oregon somewhere between 1996 and 1998. He enlisted in the Army at the age of 20, serving time in Egypt, Fort Hood, and Fort Lewis. He was well known for loving the crazy clown crew and for drinking excessively. He declared himself an atheist in 2000, the year he was honorably dismissed from the Army. So, should we say this all started from childhood? Was his poor background the reason for him being a serial killer? In Anchorage, Alaska, on February 1, 2012, 18-year-old Samantha Koenig was working the late shift at the ubiquitous Grand's Espresso coffee stand. She had been employed there for almost a month, and the regulars enjoyed having her around. At this point in his career, Israel Keyes had become comfortable with the Common Grounds espresso stand, as he was stalking 4 sites rather than people in search of easy targets. It was easy to target because it opened later than other coffee shops. Israel had selected that specific evening since the very following day. He was scheduled to embark on a cruise from Louisiana to Mexico. He put 2 heaters in his shed at home in Anchorage to keep it warm and covered the floor with a tarp to contain any blood. After listening to his traffic scanner just before 8 in the evening, he learned that something significant was occurring on the opposite side of Anchorage that would drive the police away. Israel Keyes approached the coffee stand on the Common Grounds while wearing a ski mask over his face. He didn't even know how many people worked there, but he still intended to plunder the place. Sadly, it was simply Samantha, the 18-year-old worker at the coffee shop. With poise, he approached and requested an Americana. He brandished a pistol at Samantha as she turned to give him the drink that she had just made. He instructed her to turn out the lights in the meanwhile and climbed through the window into the coffee shop. She begged and said her father would be there any moment to take her up as he shackled her and forced her to get on her knees. After some hesitation, he shoved her and gagged at the car door. He told her he was going to hold her for ransom and placed her in the passenger seat. Then, he took a car to his home. Although it's unclear who his first murder victim was, he claimed to have killed someone in 2001 while residing in Nia Bay, Washington. In addition, he has confessed to killing a couple when living in Washington and made references to their burial place being close to a valley.
So I knew I was either going to have to knock him out or just kill him. he saw the gun, he started to say something, and it just pissed me off, and I just started pulling the trigger.
However, Israel also stated that he had killed 4 people in total between 2001 and 2007 while residing in Washington state. Despite this, Israel provided detectives with very little information, mentioning 2 distinct murders that occurred in either 2005 or 2006. Israel Keyes relocated to Anchorage, Alaska in 2007, where he started Keyes Construction and started his career as a contractor. He gave off the impression of being a fairly typical Joe who was committed to his work and a family man to his girlfriend and daughter.
Anybody in his family, his friends, his relationships, his spouses had any idea what he was doing.
Where I got my kicks, I guess, was being able to live 2 different lives and have no one have a clue.
He was a quiet man who kept to himself most of the time, but he was nothing from that. Israel Keyes had previously committed bank robbery, serial killing, and everything in between by that point. Ted Bundy was his hero, and there were indeed many similarities between the two. He would travel throughout the United States from Anchorage, always trying to deflect attention from himself while carrying out murders and other heinous deeds. Furthermore, Israel Keyes took extreme measures to evade detection and planned murders far in advance. He dispersed murder bags with shovels, firearms, and ammunition across the nation. But why was he being extra careful? Why would he go through all that stress just to cover his tracks of being caught? Subsequently, Keyes acknowledged that he had abducted a woman in April 2009 from the East Coast, taking her across state lines and burying her in upstate New York. Authorities thought Deborah Feldman, 49, might have been the victim. During that time, Keyes robbed an interpolated bank in New York. After taking a plane from Alaska to Chicago in June 2011, Israel Keyes leased a car and traveled almost 900 miles to the tiny Vermont town of Essex. Keyes entered Bill and Lorraine Currier's house on the evening of June 8th, took them captives, and then shot Bill and sexually molested Lorraine before strangling her. It was a mystery how they vanished until Israel's confession.
So I knew I was either going to have to knock him out or just kill him. He saw the gun, he started to say something, and it just pissed me off, and I just started pulling the trigger.
Nevertheless, their body's exact location is still a mystery. Months in advance of committing a specific crime, Keyes first planned to escape detection by focusing on random individuals across the United States. He really liked to hang out in remote areas like campers. He said he only used guns when necessary, and that the pleasure he got from seeing victims go unconscious after a struggle was why he preferred strangulation. But he denied killing kids or parents, mostly because he was afraid his daughter would find out about him and his misdeeds.
Something kind of changed in the way I thought, and I didn't want to do anything that would mess with kids or whatever.
Police and FBI officials, however, were skeptical about this assertion and believed Israel was responsible for the deaths of other children and teenagers. During his 3 years in the U.S. Army, Israel denied having killed anyone, but he did confess to trying to rape a woman twice, once with a sex worker while on leave in Egypt, and the other time with a college student he met in Israel. After being released from prison in 2001, it is thought that he started his murderous rampage again. Israel, however, had a run-down cabin in the town of Constable and 10 acres, 4.0 hectares. In addition, he admitted to robbing banks in Texas and New York. Furthermore, the FBI subsequently confirmed that Israel robbed the community bank branch in Tupper Lake, New York, in April 2009.
But you got a lot of money in that Texas bank robbery, didn't you?
Not really. I think it was around 10 grand.
Okay. That's a lot of money for a bank robbery, isn't it?
No. I mean, first...
You've
no.
got more.
In addition, he reported to the authorities that he broke into and set fire to a house in Texas. According to an FBI assessment, Israel robbed many banks and broke into 20 to 30 homes nationwide between 2001 and 2012. Up to 11 deaths in the U.S. are thought to have been caused by him, and there may have been even more victims abroad. Long in advance of the murders, Israel plotted them and went to great lengths to elude capture. He claimed that he picked victims at random and that, in contrast to most serial killers, he had no victim profile. He paid with cash and turned off his cell phone when on his murderous excursions. None of his victims had any relation to him. Israel took a plane to Chicago for the Currier killings, then leased a car and traveled 1,600 kilometers or 1,000 miles to Vermont. He subsequently carried out the massacre using the murder kit he had concealed 2 years earlier. Israel Keyes never provided the police with a precise count of his victims. It's estimated to be around 12, but Samantha Koenig, his final victim, would ultimately prove to be his downfall. Israel drove Samantha to the house where he lived with his girlfriend and small daughter after kidnapping her at the shop, where he tied her up in a shed next to the house. In order to hide his actions from his fiancée, he threatened to murder Samantha if she shouted. He then switched on the radio in the shed to drown out any sounds she might have made. She reportedly informed him the debit card belonged to her boyfriend when he requested to see her debit card in order to remove all of her money. After obtaining information from Samantha, he left. He then stole Samantha's debit card by breaking into her boyfriend's truck. He intended to hold her ransom for a certain amount of time, after which he would take money out of her bank account. In addition, he walked back to his house, poured himself a drink of wine, and then went back to the shed, where he choked her and sexually attacked her until he killed her. When he was done with her, he tucked her body into a cabinet in the icy shed and covered it with a tent. By then, it was morning, and he got his daughter ready for school and took a taxi to the airport, where he boarded a cruise that he had reserved months in advance and traveled to New Orleans. Israel Keyes drove to Texas after his vacation ended and looted an unburned house there. Then, he robbed a National Bank of Texas branch. He then took a car to Houston and a plane to return to Anchorage. Keyes went back to his house on February 19th, took Samantha's body out of the cabinet, and had sex with her frozen corpse. Indeed, that was the height of evil personified. What pleasure would he even derive from sleeping with a corpse? But his hideous crime didn't stop there. A few days later, he stitched Samantha's eyes open with a fishing line, took pictures of her with a current newspaper, and put makeup on her face to make her look alive. Then, he sent Samantha's family a ransom note along with the picture, instructing them to transfer $30,000 into Samantha's bank account in order to see her alive.
One of the girls kind of noticed something on the bulletin board. I walk up and there's a picture of a missing dog named Albert.
That note contained a picture of Samantha and a long typed out message.
Next, using Samantha's phone, he sent a text to her boyfriend with directions to a dog park, where he left a photo with the demands. Israel dismembered Samantha's body a few days later and disposed of her remains in Matanuska Lake, which is close to Anchorage. He then took a plane to Las Vegas at the beginning of March, hired a car, and traveled to Arizona, where he took out $400 using Samantha's debit card. In the end, Keyes used a disguise to complete the transactions, but the white Ford Focus rental car he was driving was captured on camera by an ATM surveillance system. Although the license plate was not visible in the picture, it was still clear enough to identify the car's make and model. When Keyes took money out of an ATM in Texas 2 days later, on March 9th, the FBI notified Texas law enforcement authorities to be on the lookout for a white Ford Focus. A white Ford Focus was observed parked at a motel on March 13th by a Texas Highway Patrol officer. Following Israel out of the motel, the officer saw that the car was exceeding the speed limit by 3 miles per hour. The policeman pulled him over and demanded to see Israel's driver's license, using this as a justification. The police recognized this was the man when Israel presented him with his driver's license from Alaska, and he asked for assistance.
And that's when I got out of my vehicle and approached and looked at the driver's license. And I'm like, hey, this guy's from Alaska.
Police discovered a revolver, Samantha's debit card, a dye-stained roll of bank dollars from a heist, and the mask Israel wore when taking money out of the ATMs in the car. They also detained Israel Keyes and flew him back to Anchorage a few days later. The arrest of Israel Keyes. Israel Keyes first declined to speak with detectives, but on March 31st, he acknowledged taking Samantha Koenig from the coffee shop. He promised to provide police with further information on his numerous crimes, including the murder of Samantha.
I'll tell you about everything, or give you every single gory detail you want.
But only if they agreed to keep the information secret from the media. According to him, his daughter was not to read about all that he had done to Samantha because he was scared of the negative things the media would say about him, which might make his daughter hate him more. How can a deadly and dangerous serial killer and also an armed robber be making demands? Israel informed the federal prosecutor that Samantha was deceased when the prosecution questioned him on the matter. "I have lots more stories to tell, and I'll tell you everything you want to know," he added. "I'll give it to you blow by blow if you want." Eventually, he did consent to provide the investigators with information about Samantha Koenig's kidnapping, murder, and where her body might be found.
I didn't blame you. I told you from the get-go before I even told you where the freaking bodies were left.
A few days later, the police found her remains in Matanuska Lake. He went on to tell them about his numerous prior murders. Israel even imitated Bundy's courtroom escape, after which he was apprehended by security right after. He studied and idolized other serial killers as well, although he purposefully avoided media attention for his murders out of concern for his family's safety and to avoid being called a copycat for his admiration of Ted Bundy and other killers. Dennis Rader apologized in court and showed regret for his crimes, but Israel called Rader a wimp and said he was impressed by serial killers that haven't been caught. Israel appeared in federal court on May 23rd to set a date for his trial before a United States district judge. Israel escaped his steel leg shackles midway through the hearing and leaped over the railing into the first row of chairs in the gallery area.
Our position is that at this particular juncture, we're not...
2012, Israel attempted to flee. He attempted to pick up his handcuffs using wood shavings from a pencil, but deputies attacked him and subdued him with a taser. According to investigators who questioned him, it seems that during a regular hearing on Wednesday, May 23, 2012, Israel attempted to flee. He attempted to pick up his handcuffs using wood shavings from a pencil, but deputies attacked him and subdued him with a taser. According to investigators who questioned him, he showed absolutely no regret for any of the things he did. When discussing the specifics of his crimes, Israel would get haughty and sit on the edge of his seat. However, when discussing an abduction or murder, Keyes would appear conceited and occasionally bored. Over several months while behind bars, Israel had multiple conversations with investigators. He first gave some cooperation, admitting to some of his misdeeds and expressing his desire to be put to death in a year. However, Keyes stated that he wished to stay out of the spotlight because of the bad press, but he mostly ceased helping once his identity was revealed to the public. He met with investigators once again in late November, but by the conclusion of the conversation, he appeared disinterested and said he would be open to speaking with them the next week. The death of Israel Keyes. Israel cut his wrists and hanged himself to death while he was awaiting trial. Evidence found in his jail cell, scrawled or somehow tainted with Israel's blood, included a suicide note, drawings of 11 skulls, an illustration of Baphomet, and an inscription reading Korazal on the wall. During a security check, a jail officer observed an odd red stain on cell 3's floor. Blood was all over Israel Keyes when he was discovered face down in his cell. At 6:13 a.m. on December 2nd, 2012, he was declared dead. He had cut his left wrist open along the vein, and beneath his body there was a razor blade fixed to a pencil. He was lying on his tummy, bending his left leg back when he knotted the other end of the bedsheet around his ankle. He did this to make sure he received an A+ for killing himself. This made sure the force of his leg falling back to the bed would tighten the noose around his neck and kill him in the event that he lost consciousness from blood loss. It is still unknown to the police how Israel came in possession of a razor blade while confined to his cell. Israel Keyes killed people because that was his passion. However, by not telling the detectives about the many more victims he had or the locations of the bodies he had hidden across the country, they would never know. Meanwhile, Israel left a yellow legal pad with a 4-page suicide note on it. His blood had made it illegible until the FBI cleaned most of it up, but it contained no useful information for the police or information about his crimes. The FBI made public the drawings of 1 pentagram and 11 skulls in 2020. The paintings were made in blood and discovered under the bed of Israel's detention cell following his suicide. Meanwhile, the words, "We are one," were scrawled at the bottom of one of the drawings. The FBI thinks the quantity of skulls matches the estimated total number of his victims.
The significance of 11 skulls.
We believe that 11 is the total number of victims.
Well, that brings an end to the long, tragic, and horrifying tale of Israel Keyes, the killer, sex offender, psychopath, and person who had vital evidence on a long list of unsolved cold cases. What do you think about this case? Do you think Israel Keyes' death was well-deserved? Let us know in the comment section below. And please don't forget to check out any of our videos displayed on your screen for more videos like this.